Good afternoon, and welcome to the Newseum's Walter and Leonore Annenberg Theater. I'm Jan Newhart, the Chair and Chief Executive Officer of the Freedom Forum. Today, we are honored to be joined by 5 student journalists from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. It was just over a month ago when a shooting at the high school left 17 students and teachers dead. During the shooting, these reporters, who worked for the school's newspaper, the Eagle Eye, recognized not only that they were involved in a major story, but that they also had a responsibility to report on it. Today, Emma Dowd, Christy Ma, Nikita Nukala, Rebecca Schneid, and Kevin Trejos recount their experiences witnessing and reporting on the tragedy. We are also privileged to be joined today by Margaret Brennan, CBS News' senior foreign affairs correspondent and the new moderator of Face the Nation, who will lead our conversation today. Tomorrow, these student journalists and 7 other reporters for the Eagle Eye will be on the ground reporting from the March for Our Lives rally in Washington, an anti-gun violence protest organized by their fellow students at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. An estimated 500,000 people are expected to take part in the rally, exercising their First Amendment freedoms. As the demonstrators walk by the Newseum, they will see the 45 words of the First Amendment etched in marble that grace the front of the building, reminding all who see it that every day we as Americans enjoy the freedoms of religion, speech, press, petition, and assembly. Since we opened this Pennsylvania Avenue location almost 10 years ago, more than 7 million visitors have experienced the story of news, the role of a free press in major events in history, and how the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment apply to their lives. The mission of the Newseum is to increase the public understanding of the importance of a free press and the First Amendment. Each and every day, through our exhibits and programming, the Newseum informs our visitors about the valuable role that journalists serve in our democracy. We convene programs like this one today so that people of all beliefs can come together to discuss pressing issues related to our First Amendment freedoms. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Margaret Brennan and the student journalists of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School.
Wow, standing ovation, guys. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. And that's pretty amazing. You get a standing ovation before you've said anything, guys. Now you got to live up to the billing. Thank you so much for coming here and for sharing your stories with us. I'm going to go right into questions. We will then be able to open it up to the audience in a little bit to take questions from all of you. And I want to introduce, first off, Kevin, I'm going to start with you in terms of the questions, but if you can explain your role at the newspaper when I come to you in your question as well. Kevin, you are a photographer, and from what I understand, you were one of the first on the scenes at the shooting. When did you decide that you were there as an observer versus a participant?
I mean, it's a difficult situation because I had to kind of balance the two. I had to be there for myself to see my friends and to see everyone else from our school grieving and be with them and, you know, help them through the process just as they were helping me. But also I had to be there as a journalist to take photos. And in a way, it kind of helped me like escape from the reality of it. So
when did you arrive on the scene?
I mean, obviously I was at the school, and then the next day we had a student-only vigil. So I was there trying to take some photos, trying to be as considerate as I can for my fellow students, because, I mean, unlike national journalists and everything, they have like a sense of anonymity, whereas everyone knows that I'm like from the school taking photos of other students. So I mean, I tried to be reserved, I guess, but yeah, I mean, I was there for the vigil the next day, then the vigil at night the next day, and then a couple of days later, I went to the school itself and took some photos there.
Emma and Rebecca, you're both editor-in-chiefs of the paper, so I want to come to the two of you next on this. It's a very difficult thing to tell any kind of tragedy and explain it. It's even more complicated when you are part of the story and have a personal connection to it. How have you handled that in your choices as editors?
I think, like Kevin said, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act between being a journalist and being, a survivor that was there. And, any journalist knows that sometimes it's very hard for you to cover something of tragedy, and sometimes you have to, talk about your own emotions too and deal with that. But, when it's also your school and it's your family and it's your friends, then that's on a whole other level. That's just, it's really hard. But at the same time, I think we knew that we had such a unique platform. We're not only we're journalists, but we're also survivors, and that's a platform. No other publication knows Parkland like we know Parkland. No other publication knows Stoneman Douglas like we know Stoneman Douglas. So I think that we understood that we had this platform, and we wanted to use it. The day after the shooting, I think it was that night, I texted my advisor, Ms. Falkowski, and I thanked her because I was in that class with her, and I thanked her for keeping us calm. And I said that we're going to change the world with the newspaper, and we're going to fight for the people that we lost. And I'd like to think that we have done that since then.
I unfortunately wasn't emotionally prepared enough to be able to cover the newspaper in the weeks following the tragedy. But I'm so thankful that I have staffers and a fellow editor-in-chief in Rebecca that could help carry the weight when I wasn't emotionally stable enough to. And it just goes to show like what an amazing staff I have and what amazing staff we are, as they knew I wasn't prepared enough to go out there and take photos or go out there and report. And they kind of took it upon themselves to not push or pry and just let me be able to grieve and handle the whole tragedy and being a survivor of it. So, I mean, it's all them. I mean, I can't really take any credit for being out there on the scene because I wasn't emotionally able to be there and emotionally able to take photographs or report on anything.
What makes you say that? Like, how did you realize that you were too emotionally involved, perhaps too close?
Unfortunately, we hid in the photo closet in the newspaper room, and that's where all our camera equipment is kept, and I wasn't emotionally prepared to go back into the closet.
Because you took shelter there in the middle of the attack.
Well, it actually happened during fourth period, which is one of the newspaper periods we have. It's fourth and eighth period because we do block schedule. And fourth period was the end of the day, and I was with the newspaper staff. And most of us either hid in a classroom that was easily accessible to not go up the stairs, or most of us came back to newspaper. So we hid in the photo closet, which is a closet within the newspaper room. So I didn't feel that I was emotionally able to even go back into the school to retrieve a camera or to go out at visuals when I'm an emotional hot mess and I wasn't able to accurately portray like a sophisticated, and I wasn't able to distance myself enough from the tragedy like my fellow journalists, which I'm so incredibly proud of all of them for doing.
But that takes a lot of wherewithal to have that realization and to make that choice for yourself.
Yeah, my mom actually texted Falkowski, who's our advisor, telling her like how thankful she was for keeping me safe and keeping me calm, because everybody knows I did not keep calm in that situation. And Falkowski actually texted her back and said, "No problem, but I hope she picks up a camera soon. I want to see her take more photos." And so like gradually we're getting back into it, but I mean, the kids who are on the front line, like Kevin and Susanna and all the rest of you guys writing the story so early and the NRA story, it's just amazing like how it just shows the varying levels of how we were feeling.
Yeah, but everyone deals with it differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, it's no one's fault for not necessarily, like Emma, she's now doing amazing work. And we all get back into it at different times. And I think that this is just like any other hobby, anything that anything that you're passionate about, just like we're passionate about journalism. Sometimes it's hard for you to get back into the swing of things after such a traumatic event happens. And it may have taken Emma and some other people a bit longer, but that doesn't mean that she's not still extremely, extremely important to our paper and to all of us.
Mm-hmm. And Christy and Nikita, tell me about how you first reacted. I mean, did you have a similar moment questioning whether you could return to work, or did this somehow become part of your process of writing through what you had just experienced?
Well, definitely during the shooting, when we were hiding in the closet, I knew immediately that this is something that we would have to.
It was up here on the stage. It was myself, Rebecca, and Christy, Kevin, and Nikita's seek shelter in a closer classroom that was more easily accessible.
Yeah, so when we were in the closet, I knew that this would have to be published eventually. I didn't know.
You were thinking of that at the time.
I was thinking. We were.
Well, Cassie, this is about 45 minutes into.
Oh my gosh, we were in the middle of our third quarter issue, and she literally goes, "Okay, guys, we have to trash the whole issue.
Scrap the whole issue.
We're gonna do
I think I know what our third quarter is going to be about."
Yeah.
But we also have a girl named Taylor who's like, we started doing this whole, like, she's our school safety writer. Like, any fire alarm, any fire drill that happens, like, she writes about it, and she hasn't gotten anything to write with recently. And we were like, Taylor, like, now's your time to shine. Like, this is a whole thing just for you.
When you were thinking of how to write about it as you were experiencing it?
Well, I didn't think about it right away. I just knew that it would have to happen eventually. And I think it wasn't until after the vigil, I texted Nikita if she wanted to co-write the shooting incident and the vigil with me, because it was just two of the probably hardest articles we've ever had to write and will probably ever have to write. And so I wanted someone close to me to write it with me, and also someone very capable of writing a really good story.
Right. Christy, you are an associate editor. Nikita, I understand you're a writer, and now you're an editor as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
Upgraded.
I got upgraded.
And that comes with some responsibility. So tell me about that. I mean, how did you decide you were ready to start working?
So the way that I get over things is just like doing stuff. So I found it really hard to like go back to doing normal stuff. Like I tried to pick up like bio homework and I like couldn't do it. Like my concentration was just so shot. So doing the journalism things, like writing stories and like coordinating with Christy, like how we're gonna cover it and planning it out, was really like therapeutic in a way, because we had to think through what had happened and acknowledge that it was real. And it took me a really long time to finally like accept that this happened, and like this is my school, and you know, Stoneman Douglas is a worse shooting than Columbine, and it was a really hard realization to come to. And writing the stories really helped work through that. And like at the end of the first article that we published that was about the actual shooting itself, we had to write the names of all the victims. And I remember like when I was writing it, I found that last paragraph really hard to write, because I had to write freshman so many times. And it was like really heartbreaking to see like a freshman, like you just started school and you got killed in school.
And then there's like seniors also.
And seniors, like you're about to start your future. It was just really hard to see. And I'm glad that I did it and that people could read it, because I think people need to understand that when they see the names.
And you've started to write profiles of some of the victims.
We finished, yeah, we just finished, we went to print on our memorial issue, which is... Just yesterday. Right before we got... we finished our memorial issue, which is profiles on each of the 17 victims. And basically what we wanted to do was we wanted to... Everybody, everybody knows that the victims were nice people, and that they were good, and that they had this one thing that they liked, that they were passionate about, but nobody knows really what makes them them, what makes them someone that the world is going to miss. And I think that that's what we tried to portray, that we wanted everybody to understand the kind of loss that our community is going through, and understand, you know, the world deserves to hear their stories. They deserve, you know, they weren't able to tell it to the world eventually, so I think it's our job as, you know, journalists of their school to tell their stories for them. because they deserve that. And so that's what we tried to do. So each of us on this stage wrote a story on these people, on the victims, and it was a very difficult experience, yeah.
How do you begin writing an obituary or a profile of someone that you knew, that was, as you were saying, possibly passed in the hallway, a freshman? How did you start that? Because that is incredibly personal and difficult.
So I did a profile on a senior student, and when I was going through, the first thing that I did was Google her because I didn't know her at all. So I was looking through, and I found her Twitter account.
Was that intentional, to profile someone you did not know?
No, that wasn't intentional. It was just like, I knew that we had mutual friends, so I could get to some opinions and hopefully get some connections to her family and things like that. So I wouldn't be completely impersonal, but there's still a sense of, I'm not emotionally involved, but I'm not a stranger either. So the first thing that I found was her Twitter, and she had tweeted like the day before, like, it's time to get my life together or something like that, and she was like looking forward to going to college, and it, like, you really get to know these people as people and not just as, this is the same photo that you see on every single news station. I got to see a lot of pictures of her and like doing different things, and I saw one of her at senior crowning, and like, you know, all of us, except Rebecca because she's gonna do it this year, but we all did our senior crowning this year, and like, I probably saw her a few times, but I never knew her name, and that was the hardest part, because when I was doing her profile, there were so many things that we had in common, and I felt like we would get along if I knew her, but I never got to know her.
And for me, I was closer to, I wrote 2 of the memorial stories, and one of them, I'm very close with the siblings, and that was very difficult because, you know, that's where I started when I was writing it. I started with them, the people that she loved and the people that knew her better than anyone else, and I just sat down with them and I just talked to them, you know, one-on-one, just about her, just to like get a general feeling of who she was. And I mean, like, I knew her because I was close with the siblings, so like I knew her, but I didn't really knew her, and so that's what I started with, was interviewing this, you know, her siblings who I knew, and it was really difficult for me to see these people that always were bubbly and happy, and you know, you see them in such a state that's devastating for anybody, let alone somebody that you love and that you're close with, and you would never want to see them like that. So that was difficult, and also you like Nikita said, it makes you want to wish that you got to know them, like you wish that they were your friends, and that you were able to like see how beautiful they are. So yeah.
I think in like media, we always see we see their names associated with the number 17, and we always forget that these people were actual individuals who led on beautiful lives. And I think through these profiles, we got to see that like how unique they were as a person, just all the different aspects that they had to them. And for the person I was assigned to, I chose him because, well, he's a senior, and also he was on the swim team, and I knew some people on the swim team who I could get connected with, and so I chose to do him. And just as I met with his family and started to write the story, I just constantly wished that I got to know him, just like what Nikita and Rebecca said, and he just had so much potential, just like all the other victims, and it's really sad to see, but also it's our job as journalists to really show who they were and to show the world that this can't happen again.
Mm-hmm. Did any of you know the shooter?
No, not really. I think that
I think we should just
we knew him in passing because he's a part of our community, but not really.
Yeah, let's just.
How did you choose to cover that part of it? Do you continue to print his name? I know there's a debate about that.
We decided as a publication that he does not deserve to have his name published in our publication. He is strictly referred to as the shooter, the gunman. Doesn't matter that he was a past student. It's the fact of the matter that this is all these stories that we write. That's one less thing that comes up when you Google his name, that he is the gunman or a shooter. That's it.
And did you publish an image of him?
No, I don't think we did.
And we will not.
We won't.
Yeah.
Did you all come to that decision collectively?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
We talked about it, and
It was a brief talk.
It was a brief.
because
It was a
I'm pretty
brief.
sure all of us agreed on
All
it.
of us
really.
agreed. All of us felt the same way.
There
on that.
is not one of us on this publication that believes that he deserves any more publicity than he's already getting, and we don't want to contribute to that. So
Absolutely.
Well, all of you are not just covering a story, but you are, by definition, part of the story. And you're here in Washington, which is becoming its own sort of new part of this story because of the activism that some of your classmates have decided to bring to the nation's capital. Are you participating in this march, or are you covering this march?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah,
I
Christy
think
said we'll be
heart,
snapping
yeah.
pictures, but we'll also be like cheering
Chanting.
and shouting.
I wrote
giving loud
I wrote
chants.
I wrote like a small piece yesterday about like why I'm marching, and in it I said that not only will my publication be recording history, but we will be a part of it. And I like to think that that's what we're going to be doing. I think that we all have personal opinions, so in our covering of the story, we're going to be as neutral as we can be in our covering of it. Just the facts, what happens. But in our personal lives, many of us feel very passionately, I think, about what this movement is, aiming towards. And I think that everybody should be. Nobody wants this to happen again. It's just a matter of how we get to that decision. That is the dividing factor. But I think that all of us are pretty passionate about this, as we are firsthand witnesses to the plague of gun violence.
Kevin, what do you think the movement is? How do you all describe it on your pages?
I mean, if you want to describe it in 2 words, it'd be never again. But it's students with other students gathering to say that there are certain gun laws, there are certain background check laws, there are certain mental health funding that just isn't sufficient to protect students and to protect the American public in general. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to come out en masse and go lobby to our lawmakers and to tell them that what they're doing is not enough. And look, we're the kids. Why is it that we have to be the ones who are telling you what's going to save other Americans when you're the ones who are say it in your oath of office when you join Congress?
Have you all decided on sort of common language to describe the movement? Because here in Washington, right, things get boiled down to issues and platforms and specifics. And there isn't a clear sort of bullet point list of these are our demands. I mean, how do you describe it on your own pages?
You can check out our manifesto.
Your manifesto?
No, the Eagle Eyes.
The Eagle Eye, we collectively, we wrote a manifesto of the specific gun laws that we, or just laws, not necessarily related to guns, that we want to see change, and that this is why we are marching. And so, we posted that was on The Guardian. We've been partnering with them, so they posted that, and that's a specific 9-point list of what we want to see changed, and there is about like 200 words describing each of those points. So,
and that is, to clarify, that is the view of the paper.
The paper.
Our publication, our staff.
I feel like the movement is relatively similar to that.
Yes.
I mean, one of the problems is that like it's a big school. There are hundreds, thousands of opinions. So to boil down the entire school to one key thing is practically impossible. So like, I mean, we've seen the core 5 or whatever that started the March for Our Lives, and they have their own agenda. And then there's like other people who are perhaps more conservative who have come out and said, well, look, I don't want you to do this about guns, but maybe this is okay, and we can agree there. But it can't be like said that all of Marjory Stoneman Douglas agrees on one thing, because there's so many people. And like, for example, with the victims, the families, they all came together and they tried to agree to one thing, and the best they could say was school safety, because it's impossible to have a group of conservatives and liberals and libertarians and whatever that all agree on the same thing, especially when it comes to like specific policy.
And yet that's the pressure, right?
Yeah.
For the lawmakers to do something.
I think what we hope is that There's no way, like Kevin said, for all of them to come to an exact agreement on what they should do. But the hope is that they come into to an agreement of what they have to do, what needs to happen for us to be safe again. And I think that once they come to the realization that we're going to keep covering this and that this is going to keep, we're going to keep on fighting until they do, then hopefully they'll be able to put aside some of their differences and come together and actually change things.
Have you all decided to watch the news coverage? Have you chosen to avoid television? How have you been consuming how others report on you?
Like, especially for me, because I feel like I took it really hard with everything that's happened. I remember that first night distinctly, like, I would only watch the news.
Yeah.
I watched the news. I watched the news the whole first 2 nights, and then because I mean, the news is it's you wanted it to feel real, and I thought if I watched the news, I would be okay, I've walked those halls before, this is real, this is really what I experienced, and I remember just watching the news and just seeing it all unfold and seeing pictures of my classmates pop up, and I remember distinctly a picture of my classmate popped up, and I didn't have the sound on. And my first thought was oh my God, did the number jump? Is it now 18? Did he get shot? Did he get killed? Or is he in critical care? Is he in ICU? Is he out? Is he did he just get released? It's just all these thoughts. And you watch the news to try and get some verification, but I just watched the news to make it feel real.
You watch the local news or national
I mean,
news?
I watched every news.
Everywhere,
Every time there was a commercial, I would flip it to a different news station. I had it on, and I just constantly watched it for the first 24 to 48 hours.
Mm-hmm. Especially now, with all of our classmates being on almost every news station, at least one of them every night, it's really hard to avoid seeing them. So I try to watch as much as possible without a lot of the interviews end up being the same. They're saying the same thing, and you only have to see that one time. But we want to see something. We want to see something new, and that's why we're here, because we can provide that news perspective on things, because each news outlet has to replay the same questions to their specific audience, but our audience is Marjory Stoneman Douglas, so we're playing to them, and we don't have to play the same interviews of Emma, David, Cameron. We don't have to do the same thing again. We can do something else, maybe someone who hasn't been as covered by everyone else.
Right, and I think as a student publication, we have that liberty and that resource to be able to reach out to our students who actually survived this shooting, and so we're able to accurately, we have the resources to accurately portray what happened and be able to tell the stories of what happened.
And I think also, like you said, watching the news that night,
Yeah.
I feel I couldn't do anything else, and doing anything normal seemed wrong, and just doing anything felt wrong. So all I did was just sit there and watch the news for hours and hours until my parents pulled me away and made me go to bed. But there was, I don't know, I feel sometimes it's just like Nikita said, it's hard to just sit down and do anything. How do you deal with that and just start doing normal things? So all I could do is sit in front of the TV and watch the news. Yeah,
that first night, I remember I was kind of juggling in between watching the news, changing stations on the news, and then also on my phone in the group chats, texting all my friends, seeing what they know, what's the latest that they know about, who's injured, who's passed, and everything. So it was tough, but that I know there were some people even who just completely avoided the news, but for me, I would Emma and most of them, I guess, I was just glued to the TV and to my phone.
You try to avoid, but then you're just curious. You just want to let it sink in, and I just want to watch it to see my school on the TV, our school on the TV.
Christy, you said you have the resources to cover it accurately. Have you been noticing inaccurate coverage as a consumer?
For sure. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, a lot of not all, but some media outlets have been, I don't know if they fact check what they write, but sometimes they'll get the name wrong, who they were as a person, just totally off, and that just angers me sometimes, because it's just as simple as spell check or just asking someone who knew them, just as simple as that. It could have been fixed, but stuff like that. I think since we're student journalists, we can easily address those errors and be able to fix how they're portrayed.
Does that anger you when you see that, those errors?
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, one of our other editors took the article, marked it up, and sent it back to the reporter.
Yeah,
There's an article about my advisor, and it's like 5 facts about Melissa Falkowski, and they're all wrong. There's not one that's accurate, and there's like articles like that everywhere, and and also it's just the most bewildering thing to see these articles about like people that we know and that we spend our days with every single day at school, and you're like, that is not accurate. Like that is like, and like I know, like we know these people. It's just the most bewildering and weird thing, just as a person, not even just as a journalist, but also as a journalist it is.
I'm wondering, you know, I remember covering Sandy Hook in the wake of that shooting, and I grew up in a nearby town, and I remember that I felt such a strange feeling talking to people who I knew, where I was related to, and asking them personal questions in a way that changed the dynamic from what I'm used to with stories and being a correspondent, to try to have that wall up. That wall starts breaking down when you start having personal connections. And I noticed over time that when I was also talking to people in the area, that they felt, similar to what you're saying, that it was therapeutic to see the news coverage and to have people asking and to feel the immediacy of it. But then over time, they got angry about it. They felt that they were over-scrutinized, a number of the people that I spoke with at the time. Where are you in that process, I'm wondering? Because you have such a huge, bright spotlight on you right now. In some ways, it's being asked for with this march, but what is it doing to you as journalists, or even just as survivors? How are you processing that?
I think that as it's different for me, I have to sometimes separate myself as a survivor and as a journalist. And I, you know, in the beginning, there were certainly journalists and people that covered it in a way that I felt was inappropriate, and that made me a bit disillusioned to, you know, my dreams as a journalist and whether or not the profession was what I had hoped it to be. But
Inappropriate how?
The questions that they ask, the cameras in your face, and I obviously understand that needs to happen, that people need to see, but you know, when you're in a place of such horror and such pain, it's very difficult for you to be able to mentally wrap your mind around a camera in your face while you're hugging your friend and crying, you know, at a vigil. So I think that, but with this movement, with the march, I've been able to see how journalism has elevated our voices to beyond what we ever thought that it could be. So I think that it goes, we fluctuate. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm happy about it, and there's no handbook on how to deal with this. There's no guideline on how to properly deal with the kind of spotlight that we have on us. So I learn new things every day about it.
You want the spotlight to stay on your story?
Until there's change.
I think to some extent, yes. Until there's change, we want the spotlight to be on the activism, though. There doesn't need to be media vans in front of Douglas every single day, because there's 3,000 kids that don't want to be on TV all the time, and they just want to go to school and have an education and have a normal high school life. And as seniors and as a junior, we had 2 or 3 years to have that Douglas experience, and to not be bombarded by questions about every time you go to a party and you say, I'm from Douglas, that's where I go to school, and the other kids or even the parents sometimes ask oh, were you there that day? Did you know anyone that got killed? That's just,
it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. Yeah. Sometimes I schedule an interview and then the next day I'm I can't do it, and I cancel. It's just, there are just good days and bad days, and it's hard to know what the limit is going to be for that day, yeah.
I'm not sure where we are in timing, but I do want to go to questions from the audience. So if you would, when you ask your question, there's the microphone on both sides, obviously, but say who you are if you're with a publication, or if you're a private citizen, just say your name. Are there questions from the audience? Can you come to? There's a microphone here on the stand on this side. On this side.
Hi, my name is Cláudia Trevisan from the Brazilian newspaper O Estado de São Paulo. I'd like to know if you could put in perspective how you see the march in a historical perspective, and you think you can transform the question of gun violence in the civil rights of this era. Thank you.
Well, I mean, for us, at least so far, we haven't realized, like I haven't realized that this march might end up becoming like a historic march that's remembered in the history books. For me, at least right now, it's just like, oh, my friends decided to start a march and there's going to be tons of people there. That's where I'm at. We'll see after tomorrow.
That's totally fair. Here.
Hi, my name's Kat. I'm an online editor from my school's newspaper, the George Mason University. And I was just wondering if you guys could speak a little bit to the fact that social media is such a great platform for you guys, and how are you utilizing that better than the adults who clearly don't get it?
We definitely, I mean, we're all young. We grew up with social media, so it's definitely our edge on Twitter, maybe Facebook, but Facebook is kind of getting a little. But, you know, we're like able, I think social media is definitely an essential part in this movement, just because social media kind of, I mean, people criticize us as the generation who's always on social media and like, who never like really take into account that we have to like be outside and like interact with others besides on our phones. But we've also been able to use this to just unify people from around the world from like, I mean, we've gotten like so much support from just around the country.
Australia, from Europe, from around the country. It's
and
like,
so I think social media definitely played a huge role in that. And
how can you clarify this, and anyone can jump in, when you're saying social media plays a huge role? Does your paper have a policy on use of social media? Are you talking about consuming the information that you're seeing on Twitter or however else? Or, I mean, are you using this in your reporting to inform it?
yeah, I think it's our powerhouse.
Yeah, we use social media, like opinions that are expressed on social media. Sometimes it'll give us like an incentive to go up to that person and ask them a question, but I don't think we've ever like directly quoted like a tweet or anything as like the final opinion. We always want to like clarify what they're gonna say.
But like if anybody's, you know, whenever people ask me, what can I do to help? It's utilize the powerhouse that is social media, utilize the Twitter, and like I honestly believe what I feel like journalism is giving a voice to people that don't have a voice, and I think that Twitter does that in spades. It's a form of journalism in its own right, and it allows people to elevate their voices to places that they never even believed that they could be. So I think that, you know, the mass production of views. That's really what Twitter is. It's people are able to mass produce their words for people from all over the globe to see. And we would have never had the power to create this march, or they would never have had the power to create this march or to create this movement if it wasn't for Twitter and for all of the social media that allows us to do that.
Do you want to ask your question here?
Yeah, hi, my name is Gabriel. I'm a reporter for the Student Press Law Center. I also write for my student paper at the University of San Francisco, and I want to thank you guys for coming. It's really, really great talk. So my question is, so the march is going to happen tomorrow. You mentioned that you're going to be participants, also maybe sometimes covering it. Could you speak about sort of your plans for reporting after the march, and if you guys have had any ideas in terms of what you're going to be reporting on after?
For our our issue that goes out quarterly, like our print issue, we had a third issue that was just released, and it was a memorial issue for the victims, and we strictly said that it was a strictly memorial issue. We were not going to touch anything political in that issue. It's just strictly to honor the victims that we unfortunately lost. But for fourth quarter, which we come out quarterly, we plan on doing an activism issue about all the marches, all the sister marches all over the country, the walkouts, all the movements, especially all the not all the legislation, but some of the legislation that's been passed, because not all the legislation that we want to be passed has been passed. But I mean, again, like Becca even wrote a really riveting story about the NRA cutting ties with all these, companies cutting ties with the NRA. And I mean, like, we're starting to cover it online, but next quarter in our issue is all going to be about the activism side of it.
How do you all cover those who aren't necessarily agreeing with the principles that your paper is arguing for?
Well, they have just as much of a voice.
Yeah, as we do.
As we do.
Like, they have a right to view their opinion. I think that in our story specifically, we attempt to remain as bipartisan and as nonpartisan, honestly, actually, as we can be to describe the scope of the opinions that have come out of this. We attempt to do that, and so our personal views as a publication certainly don't align with everybody in our school, but they have just as much of a right to say it as possible. Actually, last quarter, somebody wrote a letter to the editor that was just completely roasting us, and was
we were going to publish it.
We were going to publish it because we love differing opinions, and we love to put out opinions that are completely different from our own, and so. Yep.
I'm Mary Ann Paul, and I'm a private citizen. And I want to say, as a senior citizen, I have great respect for what you are saying here, telling us. I came to this museum yesterday for the first time, and I was so struck that the civil rights movement was the energy. Most of the energy came from students. And yet, I heard a congressman from Florida referred to you as children. So I'm just curious if you have anything to say about that.
I mean, we may be children, which I guess is technically a fact.
How old are you? Is anybody here above the age of 18?
I'm 18,
okay,
but
2 adults.
Most people aren't. In a sense, yes, we are children, but we also have a voice. And although most of us can't vote yet, we will be able to vote, and we can influence our parents in their voting, and we can tell them that, look, I mean, this candidate clearly is treating us like we're nothing to him because we can't vote for him, and then he'll get voted out because we won't stand for that.
There's also no age limit to speaking your mind. Somebody that is 60 does not have more of a right to say what they want to say than somebody that is 15. And especially, we have such an important perspective that we were there. So just the fact that we are younger than 18 or 18, or we're a lot younger than our policymakers, does not mean that our argument is any less valid.
And the reality is that most of the 17 people were under the age of 18. So if those kids are old enough to be in the line of fire, then we're old enough to speak out about it.
Absolutely.
Just a note, one of those teenagers from the civil rights movement, John Lewis, he grew up to become a congressman. He's now one of the leaders on civil rights issues. So.
Kevin, are you announcing? This is Washington.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Hi, guys. My name is Mike. I'm not with any publication, just here to see you guys. My question's somewhat similar to the last one. One of the things that I'm sure there's been so many infuriating things that you guys have heard, the thing to me as a viewer that bugged me the most was when people used the whole "you're just kids" argument. And it seems like your peers who are on the, dare I say, more political side of this, have been, accused by politicians in your state and others as, just being kids. You guys can't say to do homework, so why should you be making gun policy? But as journalists, what have you heard from your journalism, elders? For lack of a better term, have you felt that your voices have been, viewed as positive? Have you had a positive experience with the mainstream media, without going too political with that?
Very much so. I think so. last week we actually went to a journalism conference that we had planned beforehand, before all this happened in New York, and we met with so many different journalists, and it's amazing to see the impact of what we've been writing. It's humbling to see how people, see what we write, and they actually like see it, and they read it, and they applaud us for being able to do what we have done. And to the point of the that they criticize us as just kids. I'll say this, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, if the only thing that they can criticize is our age, then obviously we're doing something right. Yeah. So.
Thank you. I wonder, are all of you going to stay journalists? Are any of you going to sort of get out of the business, so to speak, in the next year? Has this recommitted you, changed you?
I don't think it's recommitted me, changed me. I mean, I've always had a passion for photography, and I hope to keep it as I get older and eventually, I know I'm a kid, grow up. But I mean, I would like to think of it as like a hobby in my spare time. I would always like to keep taking photos no matter what happens, but it's not in the plans for me as an engineering major, so no. I don't plan on majoring in journalism, but who knows? I hear kids change their major like 30 times. I could walk out with like a marketing degree, but who knows?
I think that for me, actually, it's done the opposite. I've always been, for me personally, I've always been kind of debating between journalism and like the medicine side of things, and which is two very different things, but yet I'm interested in them. But I think that because of this, I think my opinion is kind of skewed at the moment because I've been so immersed in the journalism of this that it's become very much my life at the moment. But I think that right now, journalism, I'm seeing the impact that it has on people's lives, and that's so inspiring to me. And I don't find that there's many things that are just as impactful as that, as elevating people's voices. I think that that's just such an amazing and noble profession, and I think that that's, if done right. And I think that it has inspired me.
Actually, for me, this is my first year doing any sort of journalism thing. I just decided to join newspaper because it was just one other thing that I wanted to do and try, and it ended up. An editor. And it ended up being like the biggest year for journalism, and for me, like getting all this experience in such a short amount of time, and getting to do things that no one should ever have to do and probably will never do, like covering your classmates that have been killed in a school shooting. It's definitely given me like a passion for the profession, and I definitely want to do it in college. Maybe not as a career, but for now I want to keep doing it.
And for me, same with Rebecca. I've been juggling with what I wanted to do, but I felt like I was I really wanted to do something in medicine. But after this whole incident, I've really weighed the option of journalism too. I know even before this incident, I wanted to be part of a local newspaper, maybe intern or do a part-time job at my university. But just having to see what an impact we have worldwide, and seeing what we're doing with this movement, it just makes me want to go into journalism a little bit more. And so we'll see how that goes.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the Emma side. I mean, I plan to major in political science, which I guess will keep me sort of involved in the journalism side of the world. But I always want to keep photography as my hobby. I think it's a great opportunity to see some great things that otherwise I guess you wouldn't have as much motivation to see. And I've enjoyed taking photos everywhere I go, especially when they have purpose like they do in journalism.
And we have, I think, are you also waiting in line for a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can keep it very short, we may have time for the both of you.
Hi, I'm Beth Lindenberg. I'm a public school teacher in Florida, but the other coast. And I was on the plane this morning very early reading my phone, and a couple of the comments that people had I hadn't seen before. And they said it's so horrible that all of you and the spokespeople from your school are being used as media pawns to push the liberal agenda. So I was wondering how you feel about that.
It's funny, honestly. It's funny. I mean, I can speak for all of us, and I speak for everybody at my school when I say that all of our views that we speak are our own. This is our voice, and we are utilizing it. And if they feel threatened by that, then that's on them.
I am absolutely bursting with joy over all of you. I wish I had that in high school.
Did you have a question? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bonnie. I'm a private citizen. I live in Boca Raton, next town over. I have a nephew at your school who's a senior, so it's affected our family in a lot of ways. So I'm really proud of you guys. So I just want to say we flew here for the march, my family and I. My question is, and I don't know if you can answer this, how do you feel about lawmakers deciding that they want to try to put guns in the hands of teachers? Now, I don't know if you can answer that, but after going through what you've been through, do you feel it would make you feel safer, not safer? Do you have no opinion?
There's certain logistics, like the fact that we ran out of paper for 2 weeks last year, and we didn't have enough funding for paper. How are we supposed to fund teachers having guns in our school?
Yeah.
And I mean, how do we do the check? Like, is it a teacher who has never had an incident? Is it a teacher who's tactically trained? There's so many problems with it that it's just, it isn't a good solution. Like, there's no reason because of a mass shooting to put more guns in our school.
How is that going to make us safer?
Yeah, I agree.
Is that your view, or is that the paper's view?
I mean, I can only speak for myself when I say that I don't feel safer as a student at Marjory Stoneman Douglas to have my teachers armed. I mean, I felt safe in that situation having a teacher who can console me and calm me down and reiterate to me that I'm safe. And I wouldn't feel safer if the advisor I was with had a gun by any means. But I mean, I can only speak for myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of the rest of the school. I'm not speaking on behalf of my editorial board, because we're all different people. Although we're one staff, we may all have different opinions.
I think that, and then now they're doing like the clear backpacks at our school too, and they're doing, and while I appreciate
clear backpacks,
they're making us have clear backpacks when we get back from school.
So you can see through them?
So you're required?
Yeah, we are going to be.
Every student after spring break.
And I appreciate that they're trying to figure out ways to keep us safe. I appreciate that. But for me personally, it doesn't matter how many clear backpacks we have, how many Kevlar walls, how many this and that, and bulletproof panels. I'm not going to feel safe until there's actual policy change that ensures that I will be safe. So I think that it doesn't,
Absolutely. One of my duties is to keep you all on time. So I'm going to have to leave it there, though I do see now we have more questions gathered here. But I wanted to thank all of you for sharing your stories, for coming here to Washington, and for continuing to do your work as journalists. I think you taught us all a lot about your personal experience, so thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for having us.